first of all. Nice to meet you. So my question, and it's in many parts, is trying to work out how to categorise this film.
Okay.
Firstly, there's a bit of time travel in it. Is it sci-fi?
Mm-hmm. That's question one.
That's question. It's part one, subsection one.
Yeah, one of the things that attracted me to the movie is the idea that we could have a film that's asking a question as to what genre it is for mostly the entire movie, and then reveal in the closing minutes the answer to that question. And that's not something that you necessarily want to do. I think people sort of need to know what world they're operating in and what set of rules they're playing by. But I thought it was a way to make something a little bit different and to create a tension, not just what was going to happen, but like, what the hell are we even doing here?
That's nice. But it does mean there's a lot of the film that's not revealed as sci-fi, so then there's another question now, and there's a relationship that's very strong in it, and it's very funny, more than anyone expected. I mean, this was like packing punches. So is it a rom-com?
Well, it's the rom-com, and I would say like romantic comedy is probably better, because like rom-com to me suggests like a very specific period in Matthew McConaughey's career that he's now moved past, and I think he's doing incredible work. But it's, when I think rom-com, I think two people on a poster with their backs to each other and the girl's holding his tie, and this one. But when I think romantic comedy, I think Annie Hall, or I think some of James L. Brooks' films, and I think that this movie has elements of that as well, and that it's people naturally dealing with the way that they relate to each other, and relationships forming, and yet there still is this specter of time travel and sci-fi over the whole thing, and it's what we're often talking about, and it was something that we were very conscious of as far as like that tonal tightrope walk that we're on. Every time that we felt like, wow, this is getting a little bit too far into the sci-fi, we would try and steer back this way, and this is mostly in the edit. Anytime this is getting a little bit too adorable and cute, let's have a guy like get drunk and drive around smoking and drinking on a go-kart, and so we really wanted to find a way to create a more complete experience by having all of these things coexist, but never really going too far in any direction.
I suppose it's nice how it manages to get that balance. And with there being time travel involved, there's also non-sci-fi time travel involved.
Right.
Because of the whole concept of meeting up with someone from high school.
Yeah.
And that for me is the bigger time travel story. I mean, both of them seem to be
right.
about... So it's a time travel film in that sense, and what do we learn about changing our past?
Yeah, we wanted to make, we had this literal time travel story that we were running, so what was the more metaphorical and thematic time travel story that we could do? And we talked a lot about Facebook and how Facebook is like our time machine now, and how it allows us to reach back into our past and reconnect with people, and it's kind of this is a new thing. Like, I don't know if 10, 15 years ago, if you would have been able to go back and find that girl that you always wondered if maybe you should have kissed her in third grade. Now you can know, and Facebook allows for that. And so we thought, all right, well, let's take a guy who's at a point in his life where he actually is really unhappy and doesn't necessarily know it, and allow him to discover some reasons why he might want to change in the present by digging a little deep into his past.
Does that happen to you? Do you get people track you down on Facebook?
Sure. Jake Johnson and I did it. We were doing an interview on this, and he talked a lot about that. Now that he's on the television show, you'll kind of get the guys like, "Hey, man, remember remember back in the day? How's it going?" And I haven't had a lot of that, but I certainly, just like anyone else, like, you have people that I don't necessarily want to ever see them again. Not because I don't like them. It's almost because I like them so much. It's almost because I'll have a memory of somebody, and oftentimes it's a girl, and that's a memory that I hold very close and that I care about, and I don't want to ever see her outside of that memory. And I feel like Facebook is robbing us of that a little bit, is robbing us of these rose-colored glass memories that we all have of our childhood, because now you get to see every single thing about that girl.
So that's actually, I left this film thinking time travel, whether actual or metaphorical, is great, but that's a good point, that if you do revisit your past, you could ruin some lovely memories with people at school.
Yeah, like hold on to a couple of them. I mean, just like, save these things, because it really, and even now, like, I don't know, and I guess we're going to get off on a tangent here, but like this generation who can document every single thing that happens to them, their memories are not even necessarily going to be memories. They'll just be pieces of media. They'll just be a movie that you could watch, and like you could cut together probably a full-length movie of your own life with all of the footage that's going to exist of somebody that's like born today. And I think that the nature of memory is going to change, because our brains are not going to be responsible necessarily for holding on to those things, and so we're going to let machines do that now, and we'll do something else.
So if ever you forget your password, your life is just
your life is gone. All your memories are gone.
So I mean, sticking with that's almost a sci-fi concept right there. Is in terms of future work, for Flight of the Navigator. Very excited because I was a nerd and loved that like you wouldn't believe. So is that a scary concept, though, taking something that nerds love?
Right. Well, it's it's not the next film. There's another film that we're making next called Intelligent Life that Derek and I wrote together. That is also a sci-fi film that sort of addresses if safety looks at the sci-fi idea of time travel and the emotional idea of regret and how those two things are linked together. This is the idea of loneliness and then the question of whether there's life in the universe. And it's a very different film. It sounds like it's kind of a companion piece. It really isn't. It's a straight up sci-fi movie, and it's not as much of a comedy. And yet I think it's going to allow us to kind of continue going down this road and seeing if we can tell stories that are allowing sci-fi to exist in our world in the way that they sort of naturally do. I think that's somewhat of a generational thing, and I think you're seeing it a lot more. Sound of My Voice and other movies that Another Earth, movies that have just taken sci-fi and sort of allowed it to be a part of an emotional human story. I think is a product of filmmakers that grew up during the era of Flight of the Navigator and of all those films, and it was such a big part of our life. And in that movie and a lot of movies like it, the reason why I love them is that they felt so real. Like that kid, when you're seeing his childhood, and I obviously having rewatched it a million times lately. When you come in and the parents are just watching tennis on TV and the dog's running around eating stuff off the floor, and there's just there's such a casual nature to all of it, and yet you're going to see a spaceship in that movie. That's something I think that we've lost a little bit in our big movies. Everything feels so big and grand and cinematic, and that's something that I loved about even in movies like Poltergeist, the way the family would and Close Encounters and the way the family would communicate just felt so real. Around that table in E.T. with penis breath and that whole thing. I mean, like, I don't know if you'd see that in a movie that has aliens in it today. But as far as Navigator specifically, I think it's going to take us a little while to figure out exactly how we're going to do it. That is something that I am one of those nerds, and so it's not like I'm coming from the outside, and I can't say I'm the biggest fan of that ever, just because you can't say you're the biggest fan of a movie ever, because there's always some guy who's like always some guy in his basement somewhere. But it's something that I think it's something that spoke to me a lot when I was a kid, and it's something that I've found to be indelible in a lot of ways. It wasn't a successful film, and yet it's a film that a lot of people, and pretty much everybody in this room, we've been talking about, like, they remember that movie, and there was something about it that grabbed them and that stuck with them. And a lot of times they don't even remember specifically what it is. Yeah, it was a spaceship flying around, and like the kid's kind of lost, but like I think that there's a core idea in that of a child being robbed of his childhood and having to try and go home, and the reason why he's going home is a very Wizard of Oz, like very fundamental, like wanting to get home in that movie. But the reason why he's wanting to get home is so he can live his childhood, and it's a cool time travel idea, but it's also just a very scary idea for a kid, not just to imagine, oh my God, what if your parents were suddenly old, but to have like your mission to be like, no, I deserve those years. I even if they're going to be uncomfortable and people are going to make fun of me and I'm going to hate high school, like I get to have that, and I've earned it, and I love that as a motivation for wanting to accomplish a mission.
So I'm looking forward to it now. I mean, watching it when I was the same age, it's going to be interesting in comparison to watching it now when an old man with far less hair.
Right. Well, and also I can't even guarantee that that movie will be, just because we're all of us, Disney, all of us, like, we're so focused on making sure that it works and that it's good, and none of us want to make a bad, cheap knockoff version of Flight of the Navigator just so we can make a remake. Like, the producers, the studio, no one's interested in that, and we wouldn't have wanted to do it if that was the case. And so I think everyone's really earnest desire to take that and flesh those themes out into something that can not only work for kids today. I have a 4-year-old son. This is a movie for him, and something that works for him. But also, like, I think there are a lot of things in that movie that are going to touch on somewhat similar themes that we have in Safety Not Guaranteed, of being at that point in your life where you're looking back and realizing, okay, these are the choices, and this is what it is. And I think that's something, like, in my generation, and in our generation, like, we've held on to our childhood tighter than generations before us, and you see it in this character in this movie, in Kenneth. He has he's always talking about his Star Wars figures and all these things that are like these sort of seminal parts of our youth, and that to me, I think there'll be a consistent theme in other things that we do. It's something that we're really interested in, is why our generation has not been able to let go of the 80s.
I mean, the slight Back to the Future pose in the poster.
Right.
It's just fantastic.
Yeah, he's in on it. Like, he gets it. Like, he loves that movie too.
So the difference between people's expectations of any film, but a good example would be Flight of the Navigator, and compared to this, is that not that many people are going to go into this knowing as much. Yeah, one of the things that I see with cinema is that when your expectations are massive, I'm thinking Prometheus, there is no way anyone can make a film that can live up to your own imagination of what your film's about to be.
Right.
And yet the beauty of this seems to be, I certainly went into it knowing nothing, and then it was just every scene was surprising. How can you achieve a film that people have no expectations of, but try and get people to go and see it?
I don't know. I don't think that there's. It's just like, how can you make a good film? Like, I don't know. It's something. Great directors have made bad films, and not so great directors have actually somehow managed to make a good film. It's gonna be the only good film I ever make, and I think, like, there's no recipe to it. And I think, for us, we have little rules that we follow. We have a comedy rule of, it's either hysterical or it's just honest and sincere, and there's no little, like, no little jokes like that, and we stick to certain things, and we want to make sure that everything feels real, and so if it doesn't, we're going to stay there and keep trying until it does, and we want to make sure that the choices that people make in a movie are what you would do if we're dealing with you being on a spaceship. What would you do if you were on that spaceship, and not what does the character need to do in order for the movie to move on to this next set piece and this next thing to happen, and yet, good storytelling takes time, and it takes focus, and it also takes, like, knowing that you can be wrong 90% of the time. And we did it with this, and we're doing it with Intelligent Life now, and with Navigator, and all of these things. I think that one of the keys of filmmaking is being aware, not only how fallible you are, but, like, how likely you are to make a bad movie, because just one little thing can go wrong. Like, if Mark Duplass hadn't been as great as he is, this whole thing would have gone off the rails. And it's, one little element can change, and the movie doesn't work, and no one can manufacture it, no one can plan for it, and you just kind of hope things go your way.
Your job sounds terrifying.
It's terrifying on a daily basis.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
All right, thank you.